It was further necessary to invent arms for the new empire. They could hardly be those which Napoleon had borne on entering the military college, and which had been strangely described by his father as a shield quartered by 2 bars and 2 stars, with the letters BP signified Bonaparte. The ground of the shield red, the bars blue, and the shading yellow. This would certainly not do. Only Elisa Bacciocchi, whose chief characteristic was pride, quartered these arms, which had served for his passport to Saint-Cyr on the escutcheons of the Princess of Lucca and Piombino and the Grand Duchess of Tuscany. Napoleon thought otherwise. Besides, it was a matter of state as to what heraldic animal should be chosen to represent the empire. The affair was discussed in council. The cock was popular, but the elephant, which enjoyed an immense repute at that time, was not without supporters. The lion, being the king of beasts, nearly carried it on the rough copy of the decree regulating the cognizance of the empire. The lion figures in every case. A lion or couchant on a field azure? Napoleon has crossed out lion couchant with his own hand and written underneath an eagle spread. This was probably because André Favin, in his Théâtre d'honneur, followed by all the writers on heraldry who have furnished and invented apocryphal coats, had affirmed that Charlemagne took for his arms an eagle or a field azure. Even if the arms of Charlemagne were not accurately known, it could still be pointed out. Dithmar asserts that in the time of Louis le Debonair, and doubtless earlier, an eagle of metal was placed in the western portion of the imperial palace at Aix, and it was always the custom of those who got possession of the palace first of all to seize upon this eagle. Thus Lothair was recognized as emperor by sitting the eagle at his side, versus Aquila. The spread eagle upon the shield was Carlovingian. The perched eagle on the military standard seemed rather to be Roman. The soldiers of the Grand Army were the successors of the legionaries and naturally borrowed their ensigns from them. They regarded those with the same veneration and devotion and paid to them the same honors. The objects of the soldiers' worship were no longer flags, whose soft material is faded by the sun and tattered by the wind, but eagles of imperishable metal, which, withstanding the thunder, soared aloft amid the blasts of battle, and against which bullets rained in a harmless and unpenetrating shower. But the eagle was not enough for Napoleon. It did indeed adorn worthily, and with distinction, the escutcheon of the empire, affirming the imperial dignity and recalling Charlemagne to the memory that the emperor desired to assume for himself a more personal emblem. The fleur-de-lis, which had been sewn broadcast on the carpets, hangings, and insignia of the Capetian kings, would have been scarcely suitable to match with eagles. Besides, they belonged to the old order of things, which was to be forgotten. It was necessary to choose some plant or animal from the heraldic flora or fauna which could be adopted in the place of the fleur-de-lis, and was yet known to the French historical tradition. As nothing suitable of this kind could be found in the age of Charlemagne, it was necessary to search farther back. Luckily, it was remembered that metal beads had been discovered in the tomb of Chilperic at Tournai. These are supposed to have fallen off from his royal dresser mantle and to have composed his armorial bearings. The difference between the bee and the fleur-de-lis is not great. It was said that the latter had been evolved from the former rather than from the salient toad. On the entry of Louis XII into Genoa in 1507, it was remarked that the King of France wore a dress on which were so numerous bees. Were they really bees? Or fleur-de-lis? Badly made fleur-de-lis have been seen, which much resemble bees. According to Schieffelin, they were abs ex oro solidae, which possessed the king without any sting. According to Seneca and Plato, rex ipsa sina aculeo est, who is merciful and forbears vengeance. So much for the ancients. As for the moderns, it was remembered that during the sitting of the National Convention on the 3rd of Brumaire in the year 4, D'Albert-Mesnil, speaking in the name of the Committee of Public Instruction, had proposed that the emblem of the state should be a hive of swarming bees, and that it should be placed upon the front of every national building, to which Citizen Barillon had indeed objected that bees were the cognizance of several kings of France of the first dynasty, such as Childebert and Chilperic. Besides, he added, bees can never be the emblem of a republic, for is it not well known that they all pay court to a queen? The convention was struck with this merry quip and rejected the harmless suggestion of domus nil by moving the previous question. As there now actually was an emperor, the queen of the bees ceased to prove a stumbling block. Yet Napoleon did not announce the adoption of the emblem by any formal decree or order in council. He sprinkled bees liberally on his ensign as general-in-chief. He introduced them on the borders of the army colors. He adorned the upper portion of the escutcheons of the grand dignitaries, and good tales with them. He powdered them over his own carpets and hangings, but he never gave any formal and definite explanation for these bees. In the same way, green became the accepted color for the liveries of the imperial house. It became the national tint of Italy and was then proposed in 1811 for the flags of the imperial armies. It was actually adopted momentarily for the private standard of the emperor, perhaps merely because it was a traditional color of Corsica. All this had little to do with Charlemagne, but some innovations are necessary after the lapse of 1,000 years. Would it be possible to hark back to him as regards the ceremony of the investiture? Would it be possible to assemble on a Champ de Mai the populace and army in whose presence the emperor, clad in his imperial insignia, should take the constitutional oath to the nation, which had been drawn up by the Senate? The Parisian Champ de Mars, where the Federation had been celebrated, would very well take the place of the Champ de Mai. By these two traditions would be revived, and the enthusiasm of 1790 again aroused. At first, the idea seemed a noble one and invested with the pleasing air of antiquity. On reflection, however, it proved unfeasible. To begin with, the Champ de Mars, although it had witnessed the Federation, had seen also a year later the massacre of the petitioners, followed by the scaffold of Bali. Then again, the Revolution had afforded a surf for ceremonies in the open air. The notions of David and Chenier seemed delightful upon paper, but transformed into tinsel, cardboard, and plaster, they became wretched and bedraggled after the first shower. An instance of the disadvantageousness of such a plan had just been given on the 28th Floreal, May 18th. The first consul had received at St. Cloud the senatus consultum of the Senate, by which a hereditary government had been established. The scene had taken place in a gallery with only a few onlookers. The speeches had been appropriate for that age devoid of rhetoric. The private and well-conducted ceremony had been impressive by its very simplicity. 2 days later, after this, there was to be seen crossing Paris a procession of first a dozen aldermen, then the two prefects, then the chancellor of the Senate, between the president of the legislative body and the president of the tribunate. Lastly, the keeper of the archives of the Senate, bearing in both hands the act of the senatus consultum. In front of them went trumpeters from the garrison, the dragoon guards of Paris, and a band of music. Behind them followed all the general officers of the Parisian army, the governor, general, senators, general-in-chief, general division, generals of brigade, adjutant commander, civic of the constabulary, a squad of drummers and trumpeters, and finally 4 squadrons of heavy cavalry. Bringing up the rear, the chancellor of the Senate on horseback proclaimed the new emperor at the duly appointed places before the Luxembourg, at the Place du Corps Legislatif, the Place Vendôme, the Place du Palais du Tribunal, the Place du Carousel, the Place de l'Hôtel de Ville, and at the Place du Palais de Justice. At each of these points, there was a good deal of laughter, in which some of the angry performers could not help joining. Among them was Fontaine, the president of the legislative body, clad in silk stockings and short hose. He was mounted on a horse described by him as fiery, and which he continually thought would throw him in the dirt. He was furious at the mummery, which resembled, he said, a Shrove Tuesday masquerade. Laplace, the chancellor of the Senate, alone expressed himself delighted with his ride. Sire, he wrote to Napoleon, I have just proclaimed as emperor of the French amid the acclamations of the people. That hero whom I had the honor 20 years ago to launch upon a career which has redounded so greatly to the glory and prosperity of France. On this happy day, the most glorious of his life, he reiterated his assurances of faithfulness, love, respect, and devotion.